Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we're going to talk about the Shadows of Change DLC. This is the one that we're expecting next, which is going to feature Tzeentch, Cafe, and Kislev. And today we're going to be talking about Kislev itself, as it's a faction that I've been waiting for a long time. They didn't really have an army book back in the day, they had a supplement, and they do have an army book, which unfortunately we're not going to see for a while, it seems, given the old world news regarding it. For those who don't know, they said that the Kislev book will take a while to actually come out, which is understandable. They want to focus on the old world races first before going on to something completely new. But let's not think about old world too much as I'd like to, and turn our attentions to Warhammer 3. Kislev as a faction is okay. I say just okay because it's nothing too special. They do have some good units. The fact that most of their units are actually quite hybrid makes them very powerful, and they're able to do a decent amount of damage, but they do suffer right now. They definitely need new units, and some extra Lord and Hero choices wouldn't hurt, as they're already pretty much dwarfed by the Monogod factions, who had a bunch of new units being implemented directly for them thanks to the Champions of Chaos DLC, and it looks like they're going to get some more units since CA's attention is going towards Lord Packs now, and Lord Packs in theory do work in a half and half measure. Now, we do have to talk about one thing before we jump into the full speculation of things, and that is the fact that Kislev has many cultures. However, there's two main ones, the Ungols and the Gospodars. The Gospodars would be basically Katerin, Boris Ursus, Constantine, all the very deeply religious new stuff, any of the big units like the Elk Riders and all that type of stuff, because that is the Gospodar, the higher echelon of Kislev society. The Ungols themselves are a little bit more nature focused, a bit more primal, almost druidic, and they are slightly represented in Total War Warhammer 3, as you know, they do have some voice lines that says Ungols and so on. Funny enough, the Horse Archers, which should be Ungol Horse Archers, were renamed, so I imagine that they wanted to focus heavily on the Gospodar stuff for Warhammer 3's base game and then expand upon it with Ungol stuff in the DLC. Which is stuff that we're going to be talking about quite heavily in this speculation, because it's about time that we had a little bit of distinction between Ungol and Gospodar, and not only that, it's about time that Kislev felt a bit more whole rather than just separated into one side. And then obviously taking into account that right now Kislev feels very forced with that devotion mechanic, if we're going to get an Ungol thing, it should feel like a sub-race, something completely different, but still feel kind of the same. And just a little disclaimer, obviously we've not seen the Kislev army book yet, we don't know exactly what's in there, so I'm going mostly through all the lore, some things that have been carried over, and just in general a little bit of information. Some things might vary drastically, but I feel like this is what Games Workshop have their vision for, and obviously Creative Assembly need to follow that vision. So we'll start off with a possible legendary lord, and there's no other character that I can imagine other than Mother Ostankia. She used to be known as Baba Yaga in all the lore, and if you're familiar with, you know, the Slav folktales and so on, yeah, you're pretty much used to this already. So she's a hag mother, also known as a hag witch, that lives around the area known as the Dalki's Forest in Kislev. We don't know too much about this character since her rename, but what we do know is some people think that she's fairly old, that she's been around for a long time now, and that she's an extremely powerful sorceress, likely with her own magic style with a lore of hags, as we know that hag magic is something in lore through Cubicle 7's Warhammer Fantasy roleplay. All the laws suggest that she also knows how to use the battle magic, which is the 8 color laws that you know of, ice magic and dark magic, but I very much doubt that they're going to go for that. I feel like they are likely going to go for something quite unique. She keeps to herself but is a natural defender of Kislev and will rise to its defense should the motherland ever be threatened. But even the local patriarchy, that of Constantine and the Grand Orthodoxy, believe that she is more of a myth than an actual person. We know she has many followers. There are hag witches and hag mothers who follow her and her teachings, and it's very likely that they see her as a matriarch for their society. Many Ungols also look to her to guidance, but we don't know to what degree. This is stuff that we'll see later on in the future when more information is given out. One thing that is very certain, though, is that old Baba Yaga, we don't know about Mother Ostankia, but Baba Yaga had a chicken house, again following the Russian folklore, the Slavic folklore, all that type of stuff. So it can be assumed that she'll also have the chicken house here too, for the meme factor. Many people have been asking for that too, and it's very likely that both Creative Assembly and Games Workshop have been taking to that. I'm very curious how she could work, obviously as a support spellcaster more than anything, a debuffer. The lore of Hags itself is very varied. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but yeah, I think she could be an excellent character to finally bring in the Ungol representation into Warhammer 3 and have something different, have something that doesn't focus on the whole, you know, race to confederate the other factions. The fact is, if any race needs variety, it's definitely Kislev. Don't get me wrong, Kislev is an enjoyable faction, but I would love to see something different to be able to add for more replayability, as there's currently not too much now. Lord and hero versions of the Hags would be great too, just generic so you can have a new lore of magic to play around with. Well, we don't know if it's going to be done like a lore of magic or like a battle priest type of situation, but it's theming and it's very important. We have to keep in mind that usually these types of DLCs only bring in 4 to 5 units, but Creative Assembly have said a ton of new units, so I really hope that they don't go, here's a Lord and Hero version, that's it, you know? But the lore of Hags, from what we know, focuses a lot on doing debuffs, but also some buffs. This could be its own thing. This could be a direct new lore of magic. It could be very much on the support / debuff role, which, yes, a little bit of the lore of Ice and the lore of Tempest does do that, but it would be its completely different thing, focusing on just, again, uniqueness. Whereas with Kislev's normal lores, you kind of have to use them together to get the full effect. This would be something that you can use by itself. And again, when it comes to unique laws of magic, people do appreciate that more. One thing that really does annoy me about the Wood Elves, for example, is that they got shoehorned into having the lore of high magic and the lore of dark magic, when in all honesty, they should have had the lore of Athaloran. It would have been really cool to see something like that. My only big question is, what mounts would they have? Horses make sense. I just wouldn't want to see Hags riding on bears, because I am pretty sick of bears at this point. It'd be cool if they had elks, for example, some large elks and maybe a flying mount. We'll talk about some potential monstrous units later on in the video, but it definitely can't be another bear. I'm really sick of seeing bears. Now, before we continue into any new stuff, it's the perfect time to revisit Catherine. You see, Catherine was known to have a sled of elks, right? And we didn't get that for Warhammer 3. It's likely that that was cut content, or they just didn't have time. So it might be time to revisit Catherine, give her her famous sled, and a lot of people would go back for it. I actually know some people who haven't played Catherine as of yet, because they're like, well, she doesn't have the sled, it would be cool. Eventually, we'll probably get it. I'll wait until then, so I'll play Konstantin and Boris until then. It's not a deal breaker if she gets it or not, but the fact is that if she doesn't get it now, we don't know exactly when Kislev will get more DLC in the future, and it would be a missed opportunity more than anything. I very much doubt that Kislev is going to get a legendary hero during this DLC. We know there's one attached to the DLC, but considering that they just had recently Ulrika Magdova, which is shared with the Empire, I doubt it. However, just in case, we do know of the Golden Knight. We don't know too much about her, just the fact that she's basically donned her father's armor. She is an excellent fighter. She is a defender of Kislev. We know that her horse, which is the concept art that you can see on the screen, has been worked on a little bit. So there is plans to introduce her eventually. And I imagine she'd be a melee-focused hero, likely a duelist, but very good on horseback if needed, possibly with a lance. I'm rather curious to know more about the Golden Knight, so if anyone from CA is listening, I'm just saying, you haven't done a short story in a while since the launch of Warhammer 3, it would be cool to find out more about her. Hint, hint. Okay, we're going to jump into actual units now, and I've got a few ideas. Some stuff would be kind of new. See, we already kind of have the Ungol horse archers, they're just called basic horse archers, right? So it would be kind of cool if we had an actual horse archer unit, but it wasn't actual on horses. So this would be on elks. Ungol Elk Riders. They'd be fast, they'd be durable, very good at charges, but also very good at going into the trees, shooting from the trees. You'd have something akin to a very good skirmish unit. We've already got some Elk Riders, obviously, with the Wood Elves, and they'd kind of work with that situation too. I think something like this would give Kislev a little bit more skirmish firepower, while also taking some animals that we know from that region and introducing it to Kislev more, so that it's not just bears, 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 and more bears, right? I know some people are expecting bears with wings, but I'd love to see some elks being introduced and maybe used as mounts for hags too. Uragan cannons are something that we really should get in the future. It's essentially an organ gun pulled by horses, but it would be great to have some more artillery for the Kislevites. Obviously, right now all they've got is Little Grom, which is good as a mortar, don't get me wrong, and it's able to do a decent amount of damage in melee because, you know, bears once again, but it would be cool to have a fast-moving artillery piece that you could easily move around, put into place, fire, and then move around with the horses should you need to get away. It could have a different setting, like a pack-up mechanic, and then an unpack mechanic, similar to how you used to do in Age of Empires, right, with the trebuchets? You could easily have two variants too, one which is like an organ gun, and the other one which is more like a standard light cannon, but just to add a little bit more firepower, which is desperately needed for Kislev. Some variety is also good, because I know people like variety. Sometimes you might not use those units all the time, but it's better to have and not need. And it depends, obviously, if Kislev is your main, you're going to want this anyway. Kislev does need a flying unit, and I know a lot of people would like to see flying bears, but I'm thinking either an ice hawk or an ice owl. Both of them would work very, very well for the theme of Kislev, but it's just something big, you know, a giant eagle just in ice that be able to move around very quickly, take out enemy units, fight against enemy flyers, as you are dealing with stuff like manticores and dragons and worms and so on, so it would be cool to have something like this. I kind of like the idea of an owl more, mostly because owls are just freaking cool, and we do have a lot of eagles and hawks already in-game. So just imagine a really cool looking ice owl. There's probably some artwork on screen right now, found online, just swooping down and picking up enemies and crushing them in the claws, maybe with a bound spell or two, considering that this would be a magical creature in nature anyway. Now we're going to double back to the Ungols again. Yes, I know, but the fact is we don't have an Ungol ground unit so far. Yes, the frontline troops, the Corsairs and so on, say that they're Ungols, but what if there was a higher tier version which was very similar to that of a human Kislevite version of the Wood Elf War Dancer? You know, something that you can keep in the forest, come out of the shadows, strike, and be like the ultimate skirmishing unit. We've got a lot of heavy firepower with the Kislevites right now. We've got a lot of basic chaff. What if we had something that could move around quickly through trees and so on? The Ungols are known to be great at skirmish warfare, and it would make sense to have two versions, for example, one with additional hand weapons and another one with a spear. Both of them would really add in a bit of flavor for the Kislevite roster and kind of fill out that little bit of skirmishing ground troops that could be needed and could work, again, very similar to the War Dancers. Obviously not as good because, well, they're not elves, but you know what I mean. And lastly, I think that chicken houses could also become some sort of unit too, where it could be like the Kislevite version of the War Shrine. Have a chicken house, which is decently fast moving, because, you know, legs. Some debuffs, maybe leadership debuffs, slow down the enemy, a few things here and there. And there you go. I think it would work out quite well. It would definitely be a meme stack because, I mean, who wouldn't want to do a 20-man meme stack of chicken houses, right? It would also add in another big creature for Kislev, which would be kind of funny. And the idea is, if it's going to get used once, they might as well do it again. It's the same thing that I'm going to say in the future with Tamokon. If they do Tamokon and they bring in the Toad Dragon mount, it would be a massively wasted opportunity if we didn't have Toad Dragon units too. And to be fair, it might be kind of nice to have a chicken house rather than the elemental bear, because the bear is very, very slow. This would not do as much damage, but it would work as something just kind of funny to see running around the battlefield. Sometimes that's all you really much want. Give it a few bound abilities too to be able to be a bit more useful, because obviously something this large would likely be a target in the battlefield. And there you go. I think honestly that would be fair enough. Now, obviously time will tell, but I do think that these units are quite realistic. For all we know, they might not even do an Ungol DLC first, because I imagine Kislev might get 2 DLCs. We're very certain that Cafe will get more, but yeah, they could even do a church DLC instead, because we know that the other religions in Kislev are active. It's just we don't have, like, the warrior priest for it just yet, you know, warrior priest of Daz and all the other gods, Tor. I don't know, we'll have to wait. I would like to see more Ungol stuff first. I'd say that Ungol stuff would be the most impressive stuff in New Lore of Magic. Obviously, Baba Yaga, or Mother Ostankia, she's actually called now. Because I feel like it would add in a lot more variety. And I'm kind of Kisleved out in the standard sense at the moment, so I would like something completely new. Because let's be honest, Katerin and Konstantin are pretty much the same faction. The only difference is just the Legendary Lord, but there's not a lot of variety there. Boris has a really strange start position, which doesn't really interest me, so I would love something new, which isn't, again, falling onto the... the race that Katerin and Konstantin have. But with all that being said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion, and I'd love to hear what you guys think. This is going to be a shorter video, mostly because it was quite difficult to think of something regarding this, considering obviously we know next to nothing about new Kislev. But who knows? I mean, we just have to wait until this summer to find out. But yeah, have a great day, guys, and I'll see you all again very, very soon.